Hi there, Civic owners. Today in your 2017 Honda Civic, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Demco's Air Force One supplemental braking system. There's 5 main components you'll need when flat towing your vehicle behind your motorhome. First thing you'll need is your tow bar, which is the connection between your motorhome and your vehicle. On your vehicle, you'll also need your base plate, which is the connection point for your tow bar to attach. You'll need safety cables, which is a supplemental connection in addition to your tow bar. You'll need your diode wiring, which takes all the lighting signals on your motorhome and transfers them to the lights at the back of your vehicle so people behind you will know your intentions when going down the road. And lastly, you'll need your supplemental braking system, which will apply the brakes in your vehicle when you're hitting the brakes in your motorhome. Now you may be asking yourself, well, do I really even need a braking system? Well, in addition to it making you legal in all states, let me give you a scenario where it's definitely going to be beneficial. So you're towing your vehicle behind your motorhome and you're going down a long, steep grade. Well, if you don't have a braking system, your motorhome is doing all the stopping, taking all the weight of your vehicle and heating up as it goes down the hill. As your brakes heat up, they begin to fade and drop in performance. By having a braking system, you can use the brakes that already exist on your vehicle and have a cylinder that will apply the pedal to take all that load off of your motorhome. This will help ensure that on those long, steep grades, you don't have any failures. It'll also just generally feel better when driving down the road. You're not going to feel your vehicle pushing you, and this is even more noticeable on the smaller motorhomes. The braking system applies the brake pedal in your vehicle using the cylinder that is attached to the pedal. This uses air pressure to apply the pedal, and the Air Force One system is specifically designed to work with air brakes on your motorhome. So it uses the air pressure from your motorhome and sends it back to the cylinder here. And what's nice about this is that it's a truly proportional system. The harder you hit the brakes in your motorhome, the more air pressure is going to be sent here to the brakes in the vehicle to apply those harder as well. To give you peace of mind that your brakes are applying in your vehicle, there's an LED indicator that is installed on the back side of your mirror, and whenever the pedal is applied in the vehicle, it illuminates the light there, so you know that the pedal is being applied. This can typically be seen in the rear view camera on your motorhomes. And another safety feature to give you peace of mind is our breakaway switch located here at the front. In the event that you have a catastrophic disconnect, the cable will pull the pin, and this activates the reserve air that is on our cylinder to apply the brake pedal to help it come to a safe stop. Since the system is designed to work with your air brakes, there's an air hose that will connect between a quick connect on our vehicle, which is a male connector, to the quick connect that taps into the brakes on our motorhome, and this is going to be our female connector. The coily cable does come included, so you'll have a connection to get that hooked up once your system's installed. The Air Force One is a seemingly intimidating installation at first, as there's a lot of components in the box, but it's actually fairly simple and pretty straightforward. There's a few large components you'll need to mount up, and then just hook those together. One of the largest components is the operating unit, which is a box that does store some air pressure, which allows the breakaway switch to use that reserve pressure to apply the pedal. And all of your air pressure that comes from your motorhome passes through that operating unit first before going to the cylinder attached to the pedal. In addition to the operating unit that is on the vehicle, there's also a reserve air tank that is on our motorhome here. And that's your larger reserve air tank that is going to ensure that you have the appropriate amount of air pressure to apply the brakes in the vehicle. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's go over the installation together so you have the confidence to do it at home. We'll begin the installation by getting all the major components mounted up. Now you'll notice here that I've got the fascia removed. That's because I recently just installed the base plate. To put the base plate on, you have to remove your fascia. So while the fascia is off, this is the best time to do the rest of your flat tow installation. So your braking system and your diodes, I highly recommend doing that now before you put it back on, while you've got the room to access all these things easily. We put our control box here right to our base plate. We attached it just using some zip ties, going through the holes, wrapping around the base plate. I put a couple more on there just for stability, and one around the side here to ensure it can't slide back and forth. We also, while we're here in the front, need to mount up our breakaway switch, which attaches directly to our base plate. There's a mounting tab on it. We just use the included hardware to attach it right to that. You'll have a bolt, a large flat washer, and then a nylon locking nut on the bottom to keep that in place. When you tighten it down, you just want to make sure that it still has a little bit of rotation. It's okay to have a little bit of friction on it, but it needs to rotate just in case of the event that you do have that disconnect, that it can pull straight and not have any kind of angle pull. On the inside, we'll need to mount our cylinder to our brake pedal. This just clamps around the shaft of your pedal. You can see here the two brackets that squeeze it together. These tighten down using a 3/8 socket. So you'll just loosen these screws up because it'll come pre-assembled. Take this bracket off here, slide your cylinder on, slide the bracket back on, and then tighten those back down. When I tighten these down, I don't use a tool. I just use a 3/8 socket and tighten them down by hand, because you can see here the bracket will bend and squeeze tightly around it, and you don't want to over tighten it to cause any permanent bending. We want to have a nice clamping force on it. So doing it by hand will ensure you don't over tighten it. Coming out of the back of it, you'll see our cable here. This needs to mount into our firewall, and you can use that using the included self-tapping screws. We did opt to upgrade ours from self-tapping screws to a nut and bolt. You can pick those up at your local hardware store. We upgraded to this hardware because the sheet metal on our vehicle here is pretty thin, and we didn't want the self-tapping screws to pull out. You'll see that there's a black metal bracket here. This does come included with your kit in the event that you have a weaker, thinner sheet metal, so you can use 3 self-tapping screws. Due to our location though, so close to our steering shaft here, there's not a lot of sheet metal behind here, so we were able to use 2 screws here. This is one self-tapper here, and this is a nut and bolt through an existing hole in our firewall. And this last one we needed to extend it over so we can get a straight line from our cylinder to our anchor point. So this actually is just attached to the metal bracket and not to any of the sheet metal. But this way we were able to move it over this way about 1 inch to achieve that straight line. It's important you have a straight line from your cylinder to your anchor point so the cable doesn't rub here on the back and cause it to fray and potentially break. The last major component we need to mount is our LED. This just attaches to the back side of your mirror using the pre-attached double-sided adhesive tape. So just peel off the backing and stick it under your mirror. You want to check the back of your mirror to make sure you don't have any sensors on it, and you don't want to cover those up if you do. We then routed the wiring from our LED down to the driver's side floorboard near our cylinder so we can get it connected up. We went up to our headliner. This just pokes back behind the headliner, so just poke it up, going all the way across. Once you get over here, you can poke it down through this edge. And then when we came around the outside here, we hid it behind our weather stripping. Your weather stripping pulls off pretty easily, so you can just pull it down, and we just tuck the wire down behind this paneling, going all the way down. You can see it there. We follow this all the way down, peeling back our weather stripping until we get to this point. From here, we can tuck it behind this panel and run it over towards our cylinder where we can start making our connections. Now that we've got everything mounted up, we can start connecting all the wiring. We'll start with our LED. We ran the wires over here. Those are going to connect to a small reed switch on our cylinder here. This reed switch is on the slot here. If it's not pre-installed on yours, it's pretty easy to get it in. It just slides in this slot, and there's a small set screw here. You use a small flat screwdriver and then just tighten that down. Off of this little harness here off our reed switch, we have 3 wires. We'll have a blue wire, a black wire, and a brown wire. The blue wire is the grounding wire, so that's why you see this 3-prong butt connector there. This comes with your kit, so you'll attach the blue wire to one of them. You'll attach the black wire from your LED that you ran over here to the other one, because that's the ground for the LED. And the third one here is just this black wire. This is just a ground wire that we had run, and it just goes back to the firewall here, and it just attaches right there with a self-tapping screw to give us our ground. The red wire from our LED will attach to the black wire from the reed switch. The last wire you need to connect here is the brown wire from the reed switch, and this is your power wire. So we actually ran a wire from our battery inside, and this just connects to that. We'll come to the wire that we routed inside here in just a second. I'll show you how we got all that wiring inside. To get our wiring in, we used the air hose that comes in our kit, which is right here. It attaches to our cylinder, so we have to route the air line in anyway, so it makes a great pull wire to get any other wiring that you'll need inside your motorhome here. If you follow our air hose over here, you'll see where it passes through the grommet. So we just poked through there with a screwdriver, and then we fed our air hose through, and then we just taped wires to it and used this air line to pull the wiring inside. It's much easier to just use your air hose to do it. The red wire that we pulled inside here is the power wire coming from our battery that we connected to the brown wire from our reed switch. The other wires you see that I pulled through here are for other components for our flat tow setup. That's not for our braking system, but this is a great time to use this airline tube here as a fish wire to pull in the wiring that you'll need for those other components as well. So it's not a bad idea to take a quick break, look at your other parts and see if they're going to need wiring routed inside. We're now going to head outside the vehicle where we'll have more connections, and we'll try to show you this on the outside. However, the grommet is pretty hard to see and access on the outside, so it's usually easier to do things here on the inside and then feed it and then just grab this airline and use it as a pull wire. We're now outside the vehicle under our engine compartment, and here's our vehicle battery on the driver's side. The grommet's located directly behind it in the firewall there, so it is kind of hard to see, but you can use needle nose pliers to reach in there to pull any of your airline hose and stuff out. If you look down between the battery and the heat shield here, you can see where we've run the airline and those wiring that we routed in. The power wire that we had inside, that red wire that we connected to the brown wire on the reed switch, routes here outside and connects to a fuse harness that goes to our battery. You'll also see here that the red wire next to it has the orange and black wire also crimped onto the same thing, so it's also getting power from our fuse switch. This orange and black wire runs down to the front over to our breakaway switch. So we've got this fuse powered. So while we're here, the other wire on our breakaway switch is this blue wire, and that just attaches to either of the black wires on our control unit here. The other black wire on our control unit here just needs to go to ground. So we just routed that up here, put a ring terminal on it, and just attached it to one of the existing screws that was already on our vehicle. We've now got all of our electrical connections done, so let's move on to our airline connections. The airline that we had poked into the cylinder on the inside routes out, comes down, goes up to the front, and it goes to our control box here. We wanted to attach it to the one labeled out. So you'll look on your thing, they're on this side so it's a little hard to see, but the cylinder on the inside will attach to out here on our box. The one here on the right is the one that's labeled out, and this attaches to our cylinder the same here. You just push this airline in and it quick connects right in there without having to do anything. The one here we'll need to run next, and this just goes here, it runs down, runs over, and it plugs into your air fitting here on the front. Now you will see that I don't have it poked in yet. It does just quick connect poke in there. When you're making your airline connection, it's important you have a square, clean cut. So you'll want to use a pair of hose cutters. We have hose cutters available here at eTrailer.com. We've got smaller types that's perfect for these 1/4 inch, and this is a larger pair that's more universal for other things. So we want to make sure it's nice and square, so hold your air hose perpendicular to the surface there, and then give it a nice squeeze, and the razor blade will cut nice and clean, giving us our surface we need to seal inside there. We can then poke it inside, and it just pokes down in there, and now it's locked into place. Now, I did leave it disconnected because when I go to put my fascia back on, I am going to have to take this back off. So just in the event that you need to take yours off, it's pretty easy to remove. You'll just need, I usually use a screwdriver, but anything that's got a couple of tabs that you can push down on the outside ring there, you can then just pull it right back out, because this is the release ring, this little piece right there. The component we attach that to here at the front is where you'll make your airline connection between your vehicle and your motorhome. So this can attach really wherever you like. We used the bracket that came with our 6-way connector. We just took a small piece of metal that we actually cut off of one of these brackets, and then we just ran it in the top here with a couple of self-tapping screws, and we did use a nut and a bolt on one of them to make sure that it's going to stay secure. This is a component that you will likely have to remove when you go to put your fascia back on. So you just kind of want to plan this out, and then when you go to put your fascia back on, you also want to keep in mind that you're going to likely have to trim around these components as well. The last connection we'll need to make is for the vacuum brake booster. This comes off of our box here. We've got a small piece of hose that we cut. The hose does come in your kit. We put a check valve in there. Make sure the black side is facing towards the unit. The hose then routes to our engine compartment here on the inside towards our brake vacuum booster line. Here's our factory brake vacuum booster line. We went ahead and cut it right here, and we also cut it right there. The small section of hose Right here is our factory hose that we cut out. We attached one side to the T here and the other side to our check valve. This is going to go to the clear side. The black side is going to go off towards our engine and reconnect to our factory brake vacuum booster line. The other end of our T attaches to the brake vacuum booster line going to our brake booster. And then the third point on our T is the line that comes in our kit that routes towards our operating unit at the front of the vehicle. We've now got everything completed and installed here on our vehicle for our braking system, but we still have a few components left we need to put on our motorhome. So we're going to head over there now. We're now underneath our motorhome. We've got our air tank here. You'll see several slots and holes around the bracket of our air tank, and you just use those as a template, mark out on the frame, go ahead and drill, and then use the included hardware to get it mounted up. A good mounting location for your air tank is really anywhere between your brake relay valves and the back of the vehicle. So it's pretty much anywhere between your rear axle and the very farthest rear of the vehicle. We have one on top here, which is our metered air connection. And then the last connection you see on the elbow here is the fitting that's at the back of the vehicle where we make our connection for the Air Force One system on the vehicle. We're now going to follow these two lines, which is our supply air and metered air, up towards the front to our brake relay valve, which is located just in front of the rear axle. And that's typically where you're going to find it and where you're going to be making your connections. Now yours is going to be likely slightly different in how it's going to look than this motorhome, as they all vary a little bit, but it's going to give you a general idea of what to look for on yours. So we routed ours here, and then we just kind of followed down the frame. We went up over top. After we went up over top the frame, we did cross over to the passenger side here and followed down the frame rail going forward. Here's our axle here, and just on the other side we have our brake relay valve. And here's our brake relay valve located right here. There are several air lines that go to it, and this is where we'll do our tapping into. Now when you're tapping into the air lines on your brake relay valve, you want to make sure you remove all the air from the system first, because it's under quite a bit of pressure and it could potentially cause harm to you. So pump your brakes until your air pressure is completely depleted, and then you can come back here and start making your connections. Our supply air is here, and you will receive a T in your kit that has the appropriate size for this. So you can use this T to help match up to the right line. The other side of our T here goes down to a 1/4 inch where we poked in the air line to make the connection to the tank. On the other side of our relay valve, we've got our other T here for the metered air. You can see this is a smaller T than the previous one. And with your metered air, this one can be a little bit more difficult to find because there are a lot more hoses down here that are similar to this size to match it up to. So what you can do is disconnect what you're suspecting to be your metered air. And you want to do this after you've drained out all the air. With the hose disconnected, you'll start your motorhome to build air pressure back up and then have an assistant press the brakes. If air comes out of the hose that you've disconnected only when they hit the brakes, then you found your metered air and you can tap into it, and you'll hook up your 1/4 inch air line here and run that back to the tank connection for the metered air on the tank. And lastly, we have the air connection here at the back of the vehicle. This is our female air connection line that you can just mount here at the back. We used a no-drill bracket to get it mounted up. You can purchase those here at eTrailer.com. But you could also use some self-tapping screws and run it right through this included bracket. We've now completed the rest of our flat toe installation, and we're getting ready to put our fascia back on. To know where we need to trim, we want to hold it up there and kind of test fit where everything's going to line up. Now that we've got it kind of mocked up here, you can see that our base plate is hitting on the bar here, it's hitting here. Our components will pass through here for our breakaway switch and here for our wiring. So we're going to go ahead and mark these so we can trim these out on each side. Then we're just going to use some tin snips to cut those out. Once you've got this side cut out, we're going to repeat the same process over on the other side. Any cuts you make, you can then go back and clean up with a file or a razor knife to knock off those rough edges and make it look a little smoother. We're now rechecking our fit, and it looks pretty good. Looks like everything's going to pass through. So we can go ahead and finish reinstalling our fascia in reverse order of how we removed it off, and then we'll just rehook up our 6-pole here and our stuff back to our bracket. We've got our fascia reinstalled, and this is what it's going to look like here at the front. Our wiring is going to be able to pass through. We had to do minimal trimming for our base plate to fit as well. And that completes our installation of Demco's Air Force One supplemental braking system on our 2017 Honda Civic.